Tonight, it's my great honor to be joined with one of my crypto viewing, future forecast viewing, remote viewing, hellfire viewing pals, Nyiam. Nyiam, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. Doing great. How you doing?
Really good, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. I've been wanting to connect with you in this capacity for quite some time to have just a general RV chat. What's new and exciting in your world?
Just came back from London, UK.
Yes. Yeah.
Finally got to meet some remote viewers. Like I live in Toronto, just outside of Toronto in Canada, and I've never met up until recently. I never met another real life remote viewer. You know what I mean? So I've just been
Yeah.
doing this online and stuff like that. So I got to meet Daz Smith and Tunde Atenrays and a bunch of other people from the Discord, remote viewing Discord and stuff like that. And yeah, it was
Yeah.
a great experience. Inspirational. Got to see what other people are doing, even in terms of like business wise, like what kind of
Hmm.
businesses people have related to intuition and remote viewing. And it just really kind of put into scope, how serious the future of intuition, that subject of the subconscious mind really is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that is still to really be tapped into. It's kind of niche, but I think it's going to grow a lot in the near future.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, there's always a need for it, but now we're finally in a time where it's accepted by more and more people. It's not considered weird or fringe or impossible anymore. Um, and it's neat to see, just to watch it grow and really to be a part of it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
I saw those pictures. That was really cool to just to connect, like you said, with all those people that we talk to in Zooms and we talk to them online, and to see it. So I'm glad you had that opportunity. It was fun watching you guys online meet up. Well, that's great. I want to talk about. I want to start. I don't want to spend the whole podcast talking about this because I know it's been kind of beaten to death already. But the anomaly, the one that everybody's a buzz about, the event that will change the world. You were a part of that project. Can you comment on, number one, what was your experience when you got the reveal of the target that, you missed the target, but you all brought back that anomalous data? Let's start there. What was your reaction to that?
My initial reaction is like I missed. Well,
Hmm.
it wasn't right.
Yeah.
So I'm very to the book when it comes to remote viewing mostly. Like
Right.
I have no problem saying that something's amiss. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't have a problem with that. But I do know that similar things have happened in the past, whether, there's a big event that can pull viewers off,
Hmm.
to perceive certain events. Um, I guess what really made it interesting is that the overlap in some of the data between the viewers. So I didn't have the huge explosions and stuff like that, but I had
Hmm.
data on some kind of legal battle going on, and
Yeah.
Edward Riordan's session had a huge chunk about a legal battle.
Right.
So that kind of made it uh, more interesting to me. You know what I mean? Whereas maybe I would have just seen it as okay, I was off target. To
Right.
okay, maybe there was something happening here, but the overwhelming data from all the other viewers was something
Yeah.
more explosive and um, world changing. And
Yeah.
as with all, future, looking at future tasks and events, um, there's always a level of uncertainty and probability. And remote viewing a future is experimental, but
Hmm.
we do it every month with world events. And so, I know that there's something to it. Not every perception is correct, but
Right.
um it works. You know what I mean? You can see,
Yeah.
you can have forewarning of future events using remote viewing. So I mean, it could be related to what's going on right now. I mean, the situation that just that's occurring right now
It's
in
unfolding.
Israel and Gaza. I mean, that's big. That's big stuff, and I don't think it's gonna just die out and then not have following events that
Hmm.
lead on from that. So
You
um,
said you said a few things, Naeem, that I'm sorry to interject, but that got me thinking. Number one, talking about future events and seeing things like it works. I mean, I always loved teasing you about like your alligator stories. Um, but that's legit. I mean, that's stuff you can't make up. As silly as that story was, you are pretty specific about what's going to happen within the month. There's the specific story about something so abstract. And obviously you've predicted the bigger stuff too, the more serious stuff. How do you process that? How does that impact your worldview and your day-to-day functioning when you realize I can see the future and I see some things that are pretty heavy? How do you not focus on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, maybe to some level, I'm a little bit, I don't know if the word is desensitized, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I've been doing it for so long. Like even before I started working with FFG, I was trying to see future events on my YouTube channel,
Right.
and I would see famous people before they pass, or major events before they happen,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it does had a big impact on I guess the seriousness or
Mm-hmm.
the reality of remote perception,
Mm-hmm.
or non-local perception, because most people's concept of it is kind of a generalized, it's very general and vague. When people
Mm-hmm.
think of psychic functioning or non-local perception, they think of like, oh, I have a bad feeling about this. You know what I
Right.
mean? That's the kind of level they think of it as. But when
Right.
you really get into it and you start doing this, you start to see that no, you can see people, you can get details on events enough to
Mm-hmm.
identify, what they are and things like that.
Right.
So once you realize that level of it, it just really changed the way I function and see the world. Is like our minds are playing a way bigger part.
Mm-hmm.
Certain things that happen in life, I don't want to sound like negative, but certain things are out of our control. You know what I mean? There's a
Right.
higher level of organization, or
Mm-hmm.
something to that degree going on. So I wouldn't say we don't have free will. I think we have free will to a certain degree, but there seems to be, a certain level of predestination, or events that
Mm-hmm.
are going to occur. Maybe they've built up a certain amount of momentum,
Right.
and there's nothing you can do to change them at a certain point, or you can't change them fully. Maybe you can slightly change them.
Right.
One example, like the way I think of it is, if remote viewers saw a big event, there's always people saying, "Oh, you should warn everyone, and
Right.
maybe we could change it." Well, I doubt that you'd be able to change the event from happening. Maybe you could
Mm-hmm.
stop a few people from being there, maybe,
Right.
you know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
it would change for those individuals, but the event overall would probably still occur. So it's a very complicated and
And if you
nuanced
changed, if you
situation.
changed it, right? If you changed it, then you'd catch all this heat for, oh, you spread all that fear and nothing ever happened, right? So you can't
Exactly.
win either way. I mean, we might change things when we put things out there like that, and
Yeah.
we just don't know based on our current focus and perception.
Yeah. It's like we're just people, we're just
Mm-hmm.
people like anyone else out there. We sit down and we
Right.
we record what we get. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
it doesn't give me any more power or influence over the world to go and make something change at that level. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe on a personal level, you could use remote viewing to make changes in your personal life.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to that global scale, I mean, I
That's
think
that's
really
a tall order. That's a real tall
exactly.
order.
I think just putting the data out is
Mm-hmm.
the best way to change or open people's minds. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I agree, and we don't know the consequences of that, but I know there's been some research that's been done, and I think that some people who have these premonitions and act on it, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in a car accident tonight, and they stay home, and then they find out there was a major accident on the route they would have traveled or whatever. I mean, that's changing the future, right? If you're seeing this is going to happen, so I do believe that predestiny or not, we do have the ability to change certain events, but I always struggle with where's that line? How much control do I have? How much free will do I have?
Yeah, I agree. And I was recently reading or rereading Ingo Swan's book,
That's what I
Your
was referring to.
Nostradamus Factor. Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
I have to agree with him. He talks about that the idea of, or the ability that we have to perceive a future event is
Right.
probably linked to survival, you know, being able to
Yeah.
change it. It's probably what it's linked to. And from my own personal experiences, I think that's true. But then again, once again, probably more on a more personal level. You know what I mean? Maybe if the whole
Right.
population was on that level of foreseeing events, maybe we could change it on a bigger scale, right?
I wonder if that's the future of of humanity. Like if we were to fully evolve or, quote, be allowed to evolve, I wonder if that's what we could become, this harmonious society. I know this sounds kind of, whatever, but if we had that ability to really tap into our intuition and our full potential and use it for good, and we could avoid a lot of things, what would that society look like? Would it even serve us though? Because I mean, look what conflict does is it teaches us stuff.
Yeah, it's some of these questions are very philosophical and they get
Yeah.
very complicated.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a very nuanced situation and topic.
Yeah.
So I guess that's like a part of doing remote viewing, being blind, and having these things put in place is to kind of isolate you from the situation. Do you get what I mean? So
Yeah.
because it can get complicated. Some
It
people
does.
some people would say that, are you causing the events, or you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Is it your right to know that something's gonna happen, or are you guilty because you
Yeah.
knew this was gonna happen, and things like that.
There's a lot of paradigms and a lot of heavy opinions, I think, that come down on it. And I guess rightfully so. It's a natural reaction that people are going to have, especially people who don't do this, who aren't experienced with this. I mean, it's shocking. I still always go back to the first time I watched Farsight. I talk about this all the time. Watching Dick and Daz make these predictions, and I'm going, okay, that would be pretty cool if it happened, but I doubt it. And then the next month, you watch the results, and you're like, oh my gosh, they did it. These guys, they actually did it, and they did it
Yeah.
repeatedly.
Yeah.
That really it changes something, and some people react defensively and want to call it, oh, it's the devil or it's wrong or it's, and some people you just shut down. You don't know what to do with that information.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember watching those, like that stuff was mind blowing, and it put me on a path. It
Yeah.
definitely put me on a new path.
Yeah.
Um, Made me take this stuff a lot more seriously.
Hmm.
Um, to see it in motion, to see the data that they were producing. Because before a lot of Farsight's projects were out, I mean, the only way you saw remote viewing was a paper, some
Hmm.
sheets of paper.
Right.
And I like to say that's like reading the stat sheet of a sports game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You didn't
Yeah, when you look at
see,
data, yes.
yeah, you didn't see the game. You just read the stat
No,
sheet
you
after.
read the
So
stats.
seeing
Yep.
it in motion, seeing them work live, that was just a huge game changer for me,
Yeah.
and was huge inspiration, and kind of solidified the reality of what remote viewing looks like in real time. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great learning opportunity just to watch them go through their, and even now, just watching you guys do what you do each week. There's so much to be gained through the future forecasting group and everything you guys put out, and the way you present it, just going through your data, I think is really helpful in seeing your structure and your process. So I want to talk about this event that just happened over in Gaza. We have this session. You had these anomalous sessions. You did two of them. And we put this out, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, it's either fear porn or oh my gosh, we got to get ready for something, or what are you guys doing? All these different comments are going on. And then this event happens. What's your reaction as you're watching it unfold?
I mean, not completely surprised, because
Hmm.
I know these guys are, they're good at what they do.
Right.
So when a lot of us get similar data, it's always a possibility. I know that there's a
Yeah.
possibility that they're picking up on something.
Hmm.
Um, it's obviously sad to see that things are going in this direction, and
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking a possible like World War III type scenario brewing here.
Yeah.
So definitely could be, a world changing event. And when we look back a year from now, it's
Hmm.
kind of hard to say at this moment. Um, but there's been times in the past where where viewers have perceived a major event
Hmm.
when they're not targeted on it. So,
Yeah.
you got to leave it in the cards. It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, Dick and I talked about this when I had him on the show, and he was telling me about on like September 10th, late at night. It was just a few hours before the first plane hit. He was off target, and he ended up sketching the towers coming down. Him and everybody at HRVG at the time. He has a great story about that. That wasn't the target at all, but that's what they brought back. And then you look at the great Dr. Riordan in 2017. He's just sitting at home, and he's like, "Oh, what's that feeling? Let me explore that." And it was the whole COVID thing that came to him a
Yeah.
couple years ahead of time when
Yeah.
they come in. Why do you think that is? Why do you think targets get? I mean, it's one thing to just get a signal and be like, "Oh, I think something's coming," and then to have the skill to unpack it as a remote viewer, but to have a session hijacked where everybody goes to it, what's the significance of that in your opinion?
Well, I guess there's two ways that I see it. Um, I don't know what the original tasking was.
Right.
So it could be that the original tasking was a future event that coincides in the same time
Right.
frame as what's going to happen. Or and the other way I see it is that whatever part of our awareness and our consciousness that kind of organizes information or delivers information to us, or select, Edward Riordan likes to call it like the attractor mechanism, or this,
Hmm.
selecting, whatever does the selecting, um, kind of overrides,
Yeah.
whatever the tasking was, and kind of says, here, this is what you need to know right now.
Yeah. This is more
Um,
important.
yeah, maybe due to the entropy, or I think there's a certain amount of intelligence
Hmm.
in that part of our awareness. So um, it may even be able to say, okay, these people are receptive to this idea, so they'll be able to,
Yeah.
they'll be able to perceive this.
They'll get the message. Right.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and we're talking a lot of philosophical stuff tonight, like you said, but I mean, I don't see how you can't bring that type of philosophy into this because there's such big questions that right now we just don't have the advantage to get the answers to. We can only do the best we can to speculate on it.
Yeah, I think you have to have a certain amount of mystic
Hmm.
mentality to deal with it, because I mean, remote viewing is the scientific process, but
Hmm.
it doesn't explain how it works. We don't know how all these things happen. So there's a certain amount of unknown that comes with it. And unless you're able to have a bit of a mystic approach to it, yeah, it
Right.
can kind of drive you crazy, or have you trying to give an answer for things that we just don't have the answers for.
Yeah, I think you have to be really open-minded and spiritual at the same time. I think scientific and disciplined. You have to combine the two. It's almost like the science of spirituality in some cases, in order to kind of wrap your head around what it is that you do and how you do it.
Yeah, the balance, that's the key.
Hmm.
Having the discipline, and at the same time having the open-mindedness to to publish and perceive and record what you get, um, because you can easily fall too far onto one side or the other. I mean, if you go too far into your imagination, or
Yeah.
just believing anything, we see there's people,
Right.
there's a lot of groups online and things like that, that it's hard to take some of the work seriously whenever it's
Yeah.
just going and when there's nothing to base it on, right? So
Yeah.
you kind of have to keep your wits about you. um
Yeah.
yeah.
You need to stay grounded.
Yeah.
It's tough. Even, I mean, and we've done a lot of really weird targets too, right? I mean, especially even outside of future forecasting, just with Hellfire. I mean, that was the point of Hellfire, is to
Yeah.
do those crazy targets where there's not really a lot of feedback on, but they're fun to explore those mysteries. Um, how do you stay grounded in dealing with those things?
For me, it's I mean, remote viewing is amazing. It's an incredible
Hmm.
tool. And um but I always, I there's a certain detachment that I have from the data. Like, really what I'm interested in most is the actual process of remote viewing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hmm.
That's what, the target to me could be anything, right? It
Yep.
doesn't matter if it's this mystery or if it's just a regular thing, structure or something like that. Um, Hitting a target that's just a known thing where there's no mystery, hitting that to me is just as amazing as describing some unknown mystery.
Hmm.
So at the end of the day, I'm just really interested in that actual process and the accuracy and the
Right.
ability to perceive. So whenever we work, the more extravagant woo type things, of course, it's always very interesting to see what comes back.
Hmm.
But I'm never like, oh, it's like that 100%, or it has to be like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because
Right.
a lot of these things we're not going to get the answer for sometimes, right?
Right. And
So
if it's a strong enough story, true or not, we can still bring back data on the story itself, right? I mean, we've seen that in our experiences.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we try to keep that, I think, in mind when you get these fantastic targets. Yeah, it matches the story, or it could match the story, but that doesn't mean it's what's actually going on, right?
yeah. So for me, it's always like the targets that have a certain amount of verification to them,
Hmm.
which the viewers can show that they are on target, and
Hmm.
then they can move into the speculative, more of the speculative
Yeah.
areas. You know what I mean? Those are really
Right.
interesting to me. Like
Yeah.
Farsight did the project with the JFK assassination,
Yeah.
or things like that. It's like there are known
You
things.
have the
We
verifiable
yeah, we
pieces.
know the car comes down the street. We know the location.
Right.
So once you see the viewers are getting all those, now when they move into the parts that are in question, it's a lot
Yeah.
more interesting because we, as remote viewers, if you study this, we know what being on the signal is like. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So
Right.
that becomes a lot more interesting, more than say something on another planet or
Correct.
something that's a little more in the air. It's like we don't
Right.
have
Like
anything to
all you
really
know is
base
there
it
was a
on.
ship in the air, and that's it. There's no more details about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
When you have a hard target like that, that's grounded in reality, verifiable data and facts, like you said, and the viewers bring a lot of that back, it's a
mm.
lot easier to digest the unknowns at that point because everything else has been accurate. Not that it's saying it's going to be accurate, but like Daz, he worked that and he ended up getting some life after death stuff, which is pretty cool when he talks about that.
Yeah, that
So
was a good one.
that was for JFK. Yeah, those are
Yeah.
some neat targets. You said you enjoy the process. And what is it about the process of remote viewing that you enjoy the most? What draws you into it?
I was always interested, like when I was young, I was always interested in illusions. So
Hmm.
like, stage illusions, magic tricks, things like that. I guess the idea of something being a certain way, but perceiving it a certain way, but it actually being different. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I guess that whole idea was always interesting to me. Like if you look at a magic trick from a certain angle, it looks real. But
Hmm.
let's say you change your perspective slightly and it's all revealed and you're just like, oh, it was just this little sleight of
Just a
hand or
trick.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was always interesting to me. So, applying it to the area of intuition and perception, I was never I never got into remote viewing trying to be psychic.
Hmm.
Like, some people get into remote viewing because they work as an intuitive,
Right.
and then they're trying to find out how to control it or how to,
Yeah.
yeah, how to better their skills. I
Yep.
was more approaching it from what is consciousness. I was just trying to discover
Yeah.
myself in general,
Yeah.
and that led to this remote viewing stuff. I was more into like meditation,
Hmm.
visualization practices, but remote viewing was the first time I ever saw it kind of applied more practically, where it's
Hmm.
like, well, there's a target, you're going to view it, and now you're going to check to see if you are right. Whereas
Yeah.
most of the meditation practices are just like visualizing something, trying to make it
Hmm.
manifest or trying to change the way you see the world and things like that. So
Yeah.
it was the whole idea of perception is not what you think it is. You know, the world is,
Hmm.
the reality is not what you think it is. I guess that's the thing about remote viewing that got me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it like we said earlier, it's that paradigm shift moment when you realize, wow, I did this and I can do it again and other people do it and I shouldn't be able to do this. I just looked at
Yeah.
something, into the future and it happened, or I looked at something that happened in the past, but I saw it, I experienced it, and I'm writing about it, and all I had was this 8-digit coordinate. And how did I do that?
Yeah,
How is it
it's
still be able to?
impossible. It's basically impossible to the rational mind. So
Yeah,
you try and explain this to somebody and they're just like, what are you talking
they
about?
I
Yeah.
hear that a lot when people ask me like, "Oh, what's that?" And I start explaining it in as simplest of terms as I can. And I always hear like, "You lost me. Never mind. You lost me." So okay, all right, that's fine. You
Yeah, I
know,
think most people assume that remote viewing is done what we would call unblinded. Like they think
hmm
that
Yeah.
someone is asked like, "Hey, tell me about this," but
Tell me about this, and we go
yeah,
look it up. In our
yeah, but
mind.
no, it's like it really is that there's no hints or no clues given, and you can actually get valid information about something.
Yeah.
That's the fascinating part about it.
Yeah, I mean that's the best way to keep the data pure, keep the integrity of it, to make sure that you're not imagining it.
Yeah, yeah. I
You
think
know.
just our society is very like left brained
Hmm.
dominant, right? So we
Yeah.
use language and we use logic to try and explain everything. So when something like this comes around, it's just like it's very hard to process for a lot of people. It's hard to get wrap their mind around how it's possible, right? But there's ancient practices that go way back, like the
Hmm.
cities and all all ancient cultures had their forms of foresight and
Yeah.
second sight and things like that for them to gain information on what's going to happen or how to heal.
Yeah.
Um, so it's ancient, but it's kind of been rediscovered in the modern times under a more scientific paradigm.
Why do you think it disappeared? Because we know they used to have it. Where did it go?
I saw this thing the other day. It said it was like a meme, but it was like, how did people think before language? Because we think in words, right? Like we in our
Yeah.
head we think, oh, we talk to ourselves in our head. So it was, how did they think before words, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, in my opinion, we used to just think in images. We used to use the whole other part of our awareness, which is the visual, the
Yeah.
creative, the intuitional part of us, and and like I said, as society became more, I guess we call intelligent or
Yeah.
modernized, it's very language based, right? So as soon as you
Yeah.
start to learn language takes over from your the more holistic perception of reality. Once you start to speak as a young child, now you have to learn how to write, how to do math, all these things,
Yeah.
and those are the survival mechanisms that we use. You don't need to be able to visualize or draw
Right.
to make a living, right? So
Right.
it's I think we've kind of disconnected from that part of us over time, and maybe even biologically sort of adapted in some ways to
Hmm.
because that's our dominant thing, language. That's how we communicate all the time,
Yeah.
even though our main
That's
form of perception is visual and
yeah.
holistic. The way we actually communicate is through language and symbols.
That's a great observation. A couple of things are coming to mind. Just remembering some of the old Jordan Maxwell conversations and him talking about the power of language and how language is magic, and breaking down the words, and even talking about like spelling. It's a spell. Like I can just hear him saying it now.
Yeah.
We've all listened to those old YouTube videos back in the day as we were starting our journeys here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that makes sense. And I remember two things are coming to mind. Number one, a book by, I think it's William Bankston. It's the Bankston Healing Method. Are you familiar with it?
No, no.
I heard him on the Higher Side Chats years ago, and I bought his book. And he's a scientist, and he met a psychic healer, and he wanted to understand how he did it. So he learned this guy's method, and then he was able to repeat it and they cure cancer in rats in a laboratory controlled setting, treating rats with tumors. It's a fascinating book with his research on it. But what he uses is what's called rapid image cycling. And he creates a set of like 20 images, but each image is something that you want to manifest in your life. And you visualize an image that represents that. And you also, with that image, attach the feeling of that thing already happening. And then what you work into there is like the feeling you'll have when the rat's healed as well, right? You work that into your cycle as you're going through it. So I'm curious that you're picking imagery for that, and saying how as language kind of came about, that went away. It would have been a more natural ability if that's how we thought. And I'm reminded of and I couldn't tell you who said it, but the story's always stuck with me and it was an abduction account. And the guy said, he's abducted over and over and over again, and they kept showing him all these symbols and all these pictures, and he's getting mad. And he's like, finally he snapped. He's like, what does this mean? Why are you showing these to me? And he said, finally, they showed me a symbol, a combination of symbols, and I realized that there was like a whole entire story that I instantly downloaded and understood in that one picture that they showed me. It was a new language, a new way of processing information. I always thought that was so unique. So that really speaks to what you just said. Once language came about, maybe that did limit and streamline our focus instead of that broad big picture there. I'm going to think about that for a while.
Yeah, one of the talks I gave at when I was out in London is a variation on a presentation I've done online. It's online as well, talking about remote viewing and the visual aspect of remote viewing. And in it, I talk about the left brain, or what I call left mode processing and right mode processing. We have the two hemispheres of the brain, and they're connected by the corpus callosum, which has the most connective fibers in the brain.
Right.
So the biggest connection spot in our brain. And there's studies where they sever that in people who have, brain
epilepsy
damage or epilepsy. And what they found is that they actually perceive reality independent of each other, and they act and they handle reality different. Yeah. So there's really two different worlds that we can perceive, with our minds. And so I think we're very heavily weighted in the left mode of processing, which is a linear serial processor. So it does one thing after the next, which is maybe why we perceive time the way we perceive it. Whereas the right mode is timeless, and it's wordless. It doesn't use words.
Abstract.
And it communicates in feelings and images.
Right.
So that kind of gives an insight, I think, to how things changed over the years, over time. How could the ancients have had this science back then? They were probably had a more holistic approach to reality. Yeah.
And it's interesting thinking about what remote viewing does is it takes that right brain imagery and feeling and sensations, and it translates it in a way that we can then use our left brain and describe it in words in a way that the average person can look at and decode.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way. Yeah, those are fascinating studies with the split brain. Like they said, they'd be thinking about going to grab this blue shirt, but then the other hand would actually grab a different colored shirt, like something that simple, grabbing the wrong thing.
Or the item they were touched, like our right brain is wired to our left hand,
right,
and the other way. So what they found is if your left hand was holding, let's say, a key, so you could feel it was a key, but the word ring was displayed to your other eye so that your left brain sees the word ring. What they found out is that your left brain will actually inhibit the right, so it'll disregard the feeling and say ring. So our dominant hemisphere, our dominant mode of processing, can kind of cut off and subdue the right mode. So I think that happens. That's why intuition and things like that are kind of more niche, because physically, biologically, psychologically, we're actually refusing ourselves, cutting ourselves down internally from that perspective, right?
So have you found that you're absolutely right? Have you found that you can strengthen that relationship between the left and the right? Do or is it a constant struggle? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I've, part of, my training for remote
Hmm.
viewing, it was, I had to really learn how to draw and see
Hmm.
properly. That's
Yeah.
that's another thing I talk about. Most adults
Hmm.
um, can't draw something realistically, right?
Yeah.
We could describe it perfectly with words, but if
Right.
you're asked to just stop talking and draw something accurately, it's a
It's
challenge.
hard.
Like,
Yeah.
try look in the mirror and draw yourself. I mean, the first
Hmm.
time I tried it, it was laughable. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But I can do
Yeah.
a pretty good self portrait now in the mirror, and that's a part of, um, like how you're saying, the remote viewing process gives our logical mind something it can't do. Like, how are you going to
Right.
describe the unknown target? All you
Hmm.
have is the coordinate.
Right.
So it forces that part of us to kind of shut down and rely
Hmm.
on the holistic part, which gives us the
Yeah.
feelings and the impressions that we can then translate and put into words, right?
Hmm.
So once I've kind of got the hang of that, how to turn a feeling or impression into a word, kind of the next step is how to take that feeling or impression and turn it into an image. So how to
Yeah.
think in images was
Hmm.
the next part of my development, and that's been the most one of the most interesting things that
Yeah.
I've pursued. Um, I mean, we've done so many debriefs together. Um, being able to draw the person who's the target, or draw the
Hmm.
location that's the target. An image is worth 1,000 words. That's what
Right.
they say. So
Right.
the subconscious, or the part of us that has the answers, doesn't use words. It
Hmm.
uses images and feelings and body
Right.
language and stuff
Hmm.
like that. So that, I think, learning to think in images is ultimately where remote viewing takes us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
um and it's a fascinating endeavor that I'm still trying to get the hang of.
Yeah.
But I've definitely made some strides. You know what I mean? When I look back at my old work and look at
Yeah.
my work today, I mean, there's a night and day difference um, between them. And that's kind
Yeah.
of trying to find that balance between words and
Hmm.
images, right? Trying to get
Right.
the balance. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. I've noticed, for me, I'm a little bit more newer on this journey, but I'd say over the past year, in like I meditate every morning. My meditations have become very visual now. When I'm meditating, I'm getting all these cool, like really clear visuals that I've never had before, and I think it's from just that practice of trying to get those. I mean, it takes a lot of work and effort to try to get an image and then hold that image and then to replicate it. I mean, I'm still drawing stick figures in my remote viewing sessions, but I think that also speaks to what level of training and discipline are you going to bring yourself into in terms of, the psychic stuff is a lot of fun, but that basic foundational skills that allows you to communicate it. If you can learn to draw, as what I'm hearing you're saying, you're now thinking more visually. You have a better foundational skill set to then express what's coming in, much like with words. So I think everything builds on everything else as you're going through this.
Yeah. An example I like to say is, say you were going to look at something and name it or describe it. So you could look at, let's say, a truck, and you could say, "Oh yeah, the
Right.
wheels, the driver's seat, the trailer." That's very easy to look and very quickly name those things
Right.
up. But if I
Right.
was going to tell you to look at it and draw it,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not going to be that
It's
fast. You're going to have to really
no.
focus in on certain details and certain
Mm-hmm.
aspects of it. So it's two different forms of perception, and
Yeah.
we're kind of oblivious to that because sight is our main
Mm-hmm.
input. I mean, we're always
Right.
visually taking in information. So we kind of
Right.
take it for granted because there's this processor kind of going on, doing all this work, and our logical language based, you know, part of us doesn't have to put in that work. So we kind of just
Right.
take it for granted, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that visual is a great skill. I've been following various sketch artists, just to try to improve my craft. And one of the things that they look at everything and they see the shapes of it. They break it down to the basic shapes to get that foundation of it. And it's something I'm trying to do with things like, oh, what shape is this face? What shape is that truck there? What shapes is it made up of? And that's a good foundation to start building on, building out your sketches as you're pulling these images back. But the other piece is feeling. Like for me, my primary strength is feelings, just how something feels, which obviously we can't translate into a drawing, at least not right away. So sometimes it's a matter of translating that feeling then into a visual, or just taking that feeling and expanding it into words to describe the significance of it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, the first time I really, um, I guess, consciously had that moment where I feel like I got the hang of turning a feeling into a word.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a huge breakthrough for me. Because
Yeah.
a bunch of the first times you do remote viewing, you don't know if you're doing it right. You're just kind of
Yeah.
writing whatever comes to your mind, and you're
Mm-hmm.
hoping that it's on target. But you do it
Right.
enough, and you get to the point where you can actually feel that feeling, and
Yeah.
then there's a reflex that you develop that translates it into a word.
Right.
So you kind of get that one-to-one
Mm-hmm.
feeling comes in, and you turn it into a word.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's the most basic skill that someone has to get the hang of if you ever
Right.
even want to have a chance of being good at remote viewing. um,
Yeah.
yeah, being able to take that indescript
Mm-hmm.
feeling
That
energy
sensation.
and turn that into to the right word, match it
Mm-hmm.
to the right word. And that's a whole other subconscious type process that goes on. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it becomes like a reflex. It's just, we just say it's the first word that comes to our mind. That's how we like to describe it, right? But
Right.
obviously something in us is selecting that word, right?
Right. There's an association there probably based on experience, enough experience,
Yeah.
and how you can do that. And I think for some it's easier. Like that for me has always come pretty easy, but that's just because I've always been really empathic and always trying to interpret what's going on. I mean, I think everybody brings their own natural abilities to remote viewing. I was talking to Edward, I don't know, one of our interviews, and he's talked about, everybody has different strengths and there's different remote viewing styles, I think, that cater to those different. And like HRVG is a very visual style of remote viewing. And I could see how that would be a huge benefit, being able to draw.
Yeah, it plays a big role because like what 90 something percent of our perception is visual,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
um our visual processing is parallel. It's like a parallel it can do multiple things at once. So yeah, there's so many different styles and ways of doing remote viewing. um I use tools from all different kinds of schools.
Yeah.
But like a martial artist might have different styles of fighting.
Right.
um HRVG, that methodology is kind of my default
Mm-hmm.
stance, right? But
Right.
if I feel that like one example I like to give is, um let's say we're working a person target, like we
Mm-hmm.
did Elon Musk recently, right?
Yeah.
um we don't need to know what Elon Musk looks like,
Yeah.
right? We
Mm-hmm.
we already know what Elon
Right.
Musk looks like. So
Right.
me
Right.
drawing Elon Musk, I mean, it's great remote viewing, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not the informational need. We don't need to know what he looks like.
Correct.
We need to know other things about him, what he's thinking, what his plans
Right.
are, things like that. So really, there's a tool for different kinds of information that you
Mm-hmm.
need at the time. So it's all different tools for me.
Yeah.
And I apply them where and where I feel they need to be applied.
Well, excuse me, bring that into the crypto, right? With what you guys are doing in crypto. With what you guys are doing on crypto, you've developed your own really method for collecting information about such an abstract concept, and it has its own structure to it. And we've had the debate back and forth with a lot of different people in a lot of different settings about, front loading. Is it front loading if you know that you're working a crypto? And I don't care which side of the fence anybody falls on, because it still works. But when you are doing a crypto target and you're following that structure, that tool set, it allows you to gain access to different types of information than you would if you're just doing a standard HRVG or CRV type of target, right?
Yeah, because I mean, we have to take into account that we're working on a time scale. We have due
Mm-hmm.
dates,
Right,
and we have informational needs, right?
right,
People need certain information. So there's kind of a difference between remote viewing done in a lab to prove if remote viewing is real, which
right,
is what most people think of when they think of remote viewing. And then
right.
there's remote viewing that's operational, that's
Operational.
actually
Yeah.
being applied, right? So um, when someone needs information, they're already past they're not trying to find out if you're a real remote
We know it
viewer.
works at that
Yeah,
point, right?
exactly.
If
Yeah,
we can save time and 2 or 3 sessions by just telling you, we don't need to prove that you can identify it as a crypto, right?
exactly. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
we can skip that part.
Right.
And there's so many cryptos
Right.
that it's not a problem. I mean, it may be a problem for some people, but personally,
Right.
it's not a problem to know I'm working a crypto target. There's so many of them, and that allows
Right.
me to, I don't need to get the smell and the taste and the temperature of a crypto, right?
Right. Right. You don't have to waste
So
time on that.
yeah, so I can go in and get the information that people actually want and need about cryptocurrency,
Right.
um, to give them what they want, right? Because that's if remote viewing is going to be a real tool, if it's real, and it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
used in real life, it's got to move beyond the scope of is it, are they doing it legitly or not? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like,
Right.
yeah, when someone wants information and they're coming to remote viewers, they have some amount of faith and belief, they think that remote viewing can give them that result. So,
Right.
uh, excuse me. Yeah, certain amounts of front loading are okay, and in some cases they're probably necessary. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that comes back to the crypto because one of the things that you guys pull back is timelines, and you don't technically or normally do a timeline on a regular remote viewing target unless you're retasked to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So having that format and knowing what you have to get into, and I just think of it as additional or different stages, from like your S1, your S2. Crypto has these different stages that you go through within that structure. You're still adhering to the structure, but you know that it's targeted for a specific crypto with what you're looking for.
Yeah. Doing the cryptos and the financial related targets, I created a template that I
Yeah.
use. I've been doing it every month, the month in advance for
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin to see
Right.
whether it's going to go up or down, and what days of the month. And I've had really good success using that template, and it's
Yeah.
not your traditional type of remote viewing. I mean, there's
No.
no sights, there's no smells, tastes, temperatures, or any of that.
Right.
It's more of up or down or sideways, things like that.
Yeah.
Is it going to go up? Is it going to go down on this day? And then trying to find out where in the month it peaks or troughs.
Right.
And over more than I have the date. I actually talked about this in London and presented the results. And there's many months that I was 100% accurate at
Wow.
forecasting when Bitcoin was the lowest in the month or the highest
Uh
in the
huh.
month. And those are the things that people really want to know in terms of trading. They want to
Right.
know when they can buy low and sell high, right?
Right.
So
Right.
without giving an actual price, if you can tell someone when it's the lowest and when it's going to be the highest within a month, they can make a profit, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many ways to approach um, getting information using your intuition. It
Mm-hmm.
just we need to create those formats for it, right? And
Yeah.
one of the subscribers who was punching the data that I've been producing said that my ability to forecast the peaks and the troughs is better than the accuracy of most of the programs out there, like the computer
Wow.
programs that forecast when
Yeah.
a crypto is going to go up or down. So we got to get creative, basically. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
always sticking to that. If I was just doing a normal type of remote viewing, it would never have been possible for me to produce that information.
Right.
So things have to be tweaked and modified for different applications, right? Yeah.
I think when you reach a certain level, which I have, I'm not speaking from experience here, other than my conversations with you guys. But I'm reminded of Edward saying, first you learn how to remote view, and then you learn how you remote view. And I'm thinking of Daz, as he's moved from CRV into now he's in flow with what he teaches. It's this subtle changes into what works for you and adapting the system for the strengths of what you need to use it for. And if it works, who cares? Go with it as long as you're not cheating and looking on the internet for what your target is.
Yeah.
If it works, keeping true to being blind, I say go for it. That's amazing.
Yeah. And with the precognitive work, like this chart that I'm talking about with Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
it's done the month before. So even if I know
Right.
it's Bitcoin or whatever, no one knows really what it's
You're
going to do the
you're
next
still
month. I mean,
blind to the what the
yeah,
line's going to be. Right.
yeah. So I mean, I could be some genius in market analysis. I'm not. Marty's the genius on that.
Right.
But yeah, there's no way for me to know what exactly
Right.
Bitcoin's going to do. So once again, that idea of front loading, in my opinion, is okay in this situation because
Right.
it didn't happen yet. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the possibilities are infinite in how it's going to go. So there's it's like world events. Oh, you're doing
Exactly.
world events. I've heard people complain, oh, you're front loaded. No, because there's literally an infinite amount of stories that could happen out there. I'm just going out and saying what's coming up in the next month, right?
Yeah. I'm just
Um,
setting my intention,
right,
to in a certain area, right? Because
right.
if you don't set your intention at all, well, you might just, yeah, who knows what you're going to see,
Who
right?
knows what you're
So
going to bring back?
yeah,
Get
you got to
alligator
aim
story.
it.
Do you? So you intend for like alligators and big fish here? Let me get some insights on this one here.
Yeah, I've seen people comment a couple of times like, how does that help anyone? You know what I mean? Like, how does this story help anyone? It's like, it probably doesn't help anyone, but that's the point is that
Right,
this is real. Like, I'm really, we're opening our minds to try and perceive what's going to come in the future. So
right,
what comes, you know what I mean?
right.
No, I don't know how an alligator story is going to help anyone, but it's a proof of
Well, it could
performance.
help the guy that gets eaten by the alligator if he
Yeah,
follows our
yeah,
content,
yeah,
right? Stay away from
exactly,
the
right.
lake this month. But beyond that, to speaking to those people who just have negative things to say, we always want to think like, oh, this information is going to save somebody. Number one, chances are if it saves somebody, then that information might come back amiss because it never happens, right? If they don't get involved in the thing that you just prevented from happening. The other piece is it's the process. It's what we're doing. It's the attention that it's gaining. It's the way I think and hope that this group will be studied, in the long term in terms of what has been developed here from an operational standpoint and how that can be used for future teams as a model to improve upon and then really create things that are actionable. I mean, we've got 4, sometimes 5 viewers collecting data for 30 days worth of news for the entire planet. I mean, that's a big, tall order to get actionable information on with
Yeah.
no retasking, right? Nobody's targeteering that. Nobody's guiding you guys on that. You're just saying, hey, what's out there? What's coming? That's phenomenal. Imagine if we had more structured teams to specific areas.
Yeah, that's the other aspect of it. We're just tagging these we're just collecting these little glimpses. We don't have
Right.
an unlimited time scale to work on it. So we might have
Right.
a week or so where we're trying to, it's more about the quantity of events. We're
Right.
trying to perceive as many things as we can to put into the
Right.
forecast.
Right.
Um, if we had maybe a month to keep digging and going deeper into stories, then
Right.
yeah, maybe we could produce something that's more exact and maybe pinpoints an exact area or something like
Right.
that. But
Right.
yeah, it's challenging. It's not easy to give the, like Dick always says, like, yeah, remote viewing doesn't make you omniscient, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
we're not omniscient. We have to use this skill to try and perceive this information, and we're just human like everyone else. There's only a certain amount that we can take in and record
Right.
and put out there. Um, but yeah, there are some phenomenal hits that happen. There are some phenomenal,
Yeah.
occurrences where it's like, wow, that's the one right there. Undeniably, that's the one right there. Those
Right.
happen. So, I understand that earthquakes happen all the time or
Hmm.
volcanoes happen all the time, but they don't always make it to the news. They're not always
Right.
big news stories. So it's
Right.
like um, this month, there's a huge earthquake in Afghanistan, I think it is. The
Yeah.
biggest one they've had in a long time. So it's
Hmm.
like, yeah, I had earthquake data in my forecast this month.
Hmm.
Um, but it's a major earthquake. So it's like
Right.
it's not about, oh, is it in the news? Let me go search and dig up some story that
Right.
it's in the news. It's like, no,
Right.
in my opinion, for me to consider something as a hit, it has to be a major news story. Like it's going to be
It
on the
shows
front
up right
page.
there.
Yeah,
Right.
you're not gonna have to go look for it. Right.
Right.
That's what I consider the hits. Right. So
Yeah.
people maybe have a bit of a misconception about that. Like I had the event where a plane crash lands off the runway
Hmm.
this month, and then there was an event that happened like that, and someone
Hmm.
commented like, oh, plane crashes, there's this many plane crashes that occur every month, and da, da, da. But how many of them are in the, they're not all in the news. They don't all make it to
Not
the
on the news,
main
and
news
they don't all
stories.
crash off the runway in the way that you described it happening, right?
Yeah. So it's like, I understand people, what people say when they say those things, but you have to understand kind of the targeting,
Hmm.
what how we're doing this. It's not that to go search for any event. It's that they should be a predominant news story. It should be a
Right.
noteworthy news story on multiple major news outlets. You know,
Yeah.
that's the difference, because we have to target our mind somewhere. We have to have a goal of
Hmm.
what we're going to see. So
Right.
it's not that we want to see negative events, or some people say, why is
Right.
it always negative events?
Because that's what's
it's
in
not
the
that we
news.
want to see. Yeah, it's we're
I'd say
targeting
that
what's
every
going to
month.
happen in the news. Yeah, maybe if
Right.
all great things happened one month, we'd see all great things. You know what I mean?
I would
So
try to always lead with that with our world events, saying, look, we're not
yeah,
trying to put negative stuff out. That's the media. We're just collecting on what the media is going to say. We're not trying to put negative things out there, but that's what's always in the news.
yeah. For remote viewing, there has to be a feedback mechanism. That's, I guess
Right.
that's the part that people who aren't familiar with it might not understand. There
Yeah.
has to be some point in the future where you get a feedback, like, okay,
Yeah.
did that really happen, right? And so the news is
Right.
a public enough venue that none of
Hmm.
us have control over. I can't
Right.
make something appear in the news. So
Right.
that's a, one of the best ways for us to try and show the proof of performance and
Right.
provide useful information in terms of what's going to happen in the future.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great point, Nyiam. We're coming up on the end of the first hour here. You know, what kind of future do you see for things with remote viewing? Where'd you like to see it go before we wrap up here?
I'd like to see, a lot more people learn, maybe if it's not, military style remote viewing, but
Hmm.
just learn more about taking control of their intuition and using the remote viewing style protocol to learn more about themselves. Because really,
Yeah.
I think that's the most valuable thing, that remote viewing can do for you. Like most people want to win the lottery, or these different things, but really, I think it's the change that it'll change the way you see reality.
Yeah.
When you can have someone hide this object, or seal this image in an envelope, and then you're gonna perceive that thing, it's going to change the way you see yourself. And I think if
Hmm.
more people had those experiences, it would just, expand it would change the way we perceive the world. You know what I mean? It wouldn't
Yeah.
be, it wouldn't, I don't know what it would be like, but it wouldn't be the way it is now. You know what I mean? I can say
Yeah.
that much. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. It's humbling and it's empowering at the same time, right? It's intimidating and it's exciting. And it really forces you to look at yourself and say, like, who am I, or what am I, and what am I capable of, and what can I do with this, and where's it going? It really does open you up to a lot of new possibilities, and it's been a terrifyingly exciting journey, I'd say, along the road. Naeem, it's been a great discussion. We got into a lot of, I think, unique areas. I enjoyed your perspectives on things, and the just the knowledge that you bring to the table. So it was a great discussion. I'm looking forward to our next conversation. I'd like to dive into a little bit more about some of your journey and some of your specific practices and how you got to this point in time. Any final thoughts for our viewers out there before we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you all for tuning in, and to all the people that support us at FFG. I mean, my heart goes out to all of you. It's the information we provide is one thing, but um, like Dennis was saying, the fact that this is now reaching more people and people are being exposed to the idea of intuition and remote viewing,
Yeah.
that's a great gift to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
That can be world changing.
Yeah.
The more that these ideas proliferate into the population, and we all kind of realize the interconnectedness of reality instead of the separation. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah, that's a great point. And thank you for the continued support, because all of you make this possible. Really, we wouldn't have this without your interest and your support. So a great big thank you to all of you for that. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. So in the comments, whatever platform this is on that you're watching this on, because I know we're putting this out on several platforms, please let us know your thoughts, your opinions, and your experience based on the things that Nyiam was bringing up for us tonight. A lot of good information in there for people that are exploring their own intuition and processes. So please comment below. If you want to find more about what we do, check out futureforecastinggroup.com. That's futureforecastinggroup.com. There's several different tiers available, and every so often they run a free 7-day trial. I'm not sure when the next one is, but it's worth checking out. Again, futureforecastinggroup.com. And that's going to wrap it up for this one. So on behalf of Nyiam and the rest of the Future Forecasting Group, I'm Dennis Nappi II. Thanks for watching.